Gen 1 Pokemon are some of the most iconic video game characters of all time. Pikachu, Charizard, Gyarados, Mewtwo, and so many more amazing Pokemon came from Generation 1. But with that said, they weren't all quite as memorable as the rest. In fact, some Gen 1 pokes were forgotten by most fans of the series. Well, until they got Mega Evolutions way down the line. But anyway, I'm your host as always, K-Max-Time, and today we're going to go over my picks for the top 10 most forgettable Generation 1 Pokemon. Now, before we get into today's list, I want to let everyone know this list is just for fun, and it's by no means saying that all these Pokemon are lame or stupid. So if you love these Pokemon or one of your favorite Pokemon makes the list, don't worry, just leave me a comment down below telling me what makes this Pokemon so great, and I'd love to get the conversation going. But with that out of the way, let's jump right in with number 10, Doduo. Now, Doduo to me is a very forgettable Pokemon. First off, it isn't a very cool looking Pokemon, and it certainly isn't very powerful either. It does evolve into Dotrio, but it's also pretty forgettable in my eye. Also, I never really understood why they made the name Dotrio when there's also Dugtrio. It sounds too similar to me, especially when Dugtrio is a much cooler and better Pokemon. Anyway, Doduo is a weak bird-type Pokemon that has a lame evolution line, so it has little to no value in the games, often than just being a Pokedex entry. Next up is probably the laziest Pokemon name of all time. Seal is, well, just a seal in Pokemon form. I always forget that this Pokemon even exists until I'm reminded of it as a much more powerful but still lame evolution Dugong, which is essentially just a bigger seal. It's like they just made it bigger and fatter, like nothing special happened to it. And the worst part about the Pokemon is that even the game developers shit on it and it seemed to be forgotten by them, is they just made another seal Pokemon named Spheal later on in Gen 3. It just made it blue, and that line is actually much more useful in the games as its evolutions are much better. Anyway, Seal and Dugong are cute, but ultimately pretty useless and pretty forgettable as Pokemon. Another Pokemon that tends to be forgotten by a lot of people is Omanyte, one of the original fossil Pokemons. The problem with Omanyte is that it isn't as cool as the other fossil choice. I mean, Omastar is okay, but Kabutops is totally badass. I mean, it has sickles for hands. I can remember as a kid never picking the Helix fossil, instead choosing to go with the Dome fossil solely because Omanyte is so lame when compared to Kabutops. Over the time, you'll sort of forget this little fossil Pokemon even exists, as much cooler fossil Pokemon followed in the newer generations of the games. Our next Pokemon is typically forgotten by players simply because you can't even catch one in the original games. Porygon has to be attained through trading with another player or through buying it from coins from the game corner, and it takes 999 coins to do so, so you better get real hot on the slots or be ready to mash the A button over and over and over, as you guys can only buy 50 coins at a time in the original games. Seriously, when I make my once-a-year run to catch all 151 on my original yellow version, this is always the last Pokemon I have to get simply because of how much of a pain in the ass it is to get. But the worst part about Porygon is that it's a completely useless Generation 1 Pokemon, and it's so easily forgotten. I mean, its moveset is so weak, it doesn't have any useful moves. It can't learn Fly or Surf or anything like that as far as I know, and it's just boring. It's just a weird Pokemon. It does eventually get an upgrade with the evolution of it in Gen 2, but in Gen 1, it's a very shitty and forgettable Pokemon. Next up is another Pokemon you have to trade to get in Gen 1, and that is Jinkx. Now, while Jinkx is a somewhat powerful Pokemon using both Ice and Psychic types, which are two of the strongest in Gen 1, it does seem to be overlooked by fans of the series in favor of more Pokemon like Pikachu or other likable Pokemon like Charizard. However, Jinkx did end up getting a ton more love in Gen 2 as it got a baby version Smoochum, and has since become somewhat usable in most of the games. But in Gen 1, most of the time you don't even remember that Jinkx exists, as you only see a handful of them throughout the game, most notably in the Elite Four battle, but that's at the very end of the game, and like I said, you have to trade to get it, you can't catch it in the wild, So it ultimately ends up being a Pokemon that is pretty usable, pretty likable, but just kind of forgettable from Generation 1. Yet another Pokemon in Gen 1 you can't catch, and as yes, you see there seems to be a theme going here, but anyway, Lickitung can only be gotten via trade for a Golduck on Route 18, and while that trade isn't all that bad, Lickitung is a pretty boring Pokemon as its moveset and usefulness are both lacking in Gen 1. Yes, we did eventually get a pretty good evolution in Licky, but that didn't happen until a few games later. Lickitung is a very odd Pokemon and another one that is often overlooked by players as it just isn't that useful in the first games. One of the lamest evolutions in Pokemon history has to go to Electrode. It is literally just a slightly bigger Voltorb, but upside down. I never liked Electrode, especially since the only thing it's really known for is self-destructing and killing your perfect Nuzlocke run. But beyond that, I don't think I've ever actually used an Electrode in my party in Gen 1. There are just so many better electric-type Pokemon like Magaton or Pikachu. Couple that with being seemingly useless and a lazy design and having a terrible moveset and you have yourself a pretty damn forgettable Pokemon. I mean, neither Voltorb nor Electrode learn a single electric-type move without the help of a TM in the original games. An electric-type Pokemon with no electric-type moves, talk about useless.
Continuing the theme of Pokemon that you have to obtain via trade is Mr. Mime, easily one of the most forgettable Pokemon of Gen 1. Hell, if you didn't have to get him to finish the Pokédex, then you might have literally forgotten he even exists. Other than playing a somewhat popular part in the cartoon, Mr. Mime does nothing in the original games. I can't think of that many trainers that you come across that have one, and you have to trade to get it. Yeah, Psychic types are overpowered in Gen 1, but you'd be much rather off with an Alakazam, Gengar, or even a Hypno, all of which are awesome Pokemon from Gen 1 that overshadow poor Mr. Mime. However, it did get a baby form in Gen 4, but that still isn't too noteworthy.
My second most forgettable Pokemon from Gen 1 has to be Tangela, a super weird looking and odd Pokemon that is typically only found in the Safari Zone, except for that one patch of grass you can surf to under Pallet Town. But again, a Pokemon that is very often overlooked in favor of much more powerful grass-type Pokemons like Venusaur or Vileplume. It doesn't evolve in the first generation, so the powerful Tangrowth doesn't really play a role in how favorable it is. This is another Pokemon that you just catch to fill the Pokédex and store it away in the PC until the game is over, and it's overall just a very forgettable one. And finally, the Pokemon I think is most forgettable from Generation 1 has to be Farfetch. Again, a Pokemon you get through trading a Spearow to a girl in Vermilion City. Now, while there really isn't anything wrong with Farfetch, I always seem to forget about it. It has a pretty weak moveset and it's just a weak Pokemon in general. Not being able to catch it in the wild also sucks. Now, yes, I know you can catch it in Yellow version on Route 12, but it's got a pretty low catch rate and it's hard to find, and in Blue and Red, you can't, so bear with me here. Anyway, it also doesn't evolve and it stays very weak the entire game. Farfetch could have been a super cool Pokemon if they had given it a proper evolution line, but they kind of just pushed it to the side in favor of Pidgey and Spearow, so it usually just gets forgotten by players of the game. But anyway guys, that's all I have time for today. I hope you guys all enjoyed. And if you guys did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps out my channel. Let's aim for 500 likes. Hopefully you guys can help me out on that. Also, down in the comment section down below, let me know what Pokemon you guys think from Generation 1 are forgettable. If I messed anything up, if I missed any Pokemon, please let me know about all that down in the comment section. I would love to get a good conversation going. Also, keep an eye out for Generation 2 forgettable Pokemon coming next week. So like I said, so make sure you guys are subscribed to get that in your sub box. Also, check out some of my previous Pokemon videos. I have done a whole playlist of them. Links will be in the end slate and the description. But until next time, guys, remember that's always K-Mac time somewhere. Until then, take it easy and peace out.
Ninja.